props to Jerry Seinfeld. Because, of course, this again was the first of 2 seasons he did of Seinfeld all on his own. He had no Larry David there to help him. Well, besides his writers, of course, whatnot. But he didn't have Larry David be like an executive producer above him. And props to say season 8, other than a few episodes I said were just meh, this was still a pretty strong season. And I think it ended very strong with these 5 episodes of Seinfeld on the last disc of season 8. They were all good. I can't complain about one of them. The Muffin Tops may have been my least favorite of the 5, but even that was a great episode still as well. The Nap, though, personally, I would say is probably one of my favorites in season 8. Maybe the Yada Yada might be up there. Who knows? But I would definitely say the Nap is one of them that I definitely like a little on the higher side about. And I thought it was pretty funny. It was also the first episode with Larry David doing the voice of Steinbrenner since he left the series at the end of season 7, which I again was surprised it took this long. I haven't realized like some things popped up more often than other things I thought popped up since I've gone back to rewatch this whole series doing this review series as well. But I think it was another pure George episode where his plan just completely backfired, unfortunately. And Kramer doing his strange thing, being the smelly East River. And Elaine having a boyfriend with a new interesting little knack to him. And Jerry can't seem to get his kitchen cabinets done, because his carpenter will not stop asking questions. But let's talk about it. So, I guess George had stayed up late night before until like 4 a.m. and he was tired. And he can't find a way to get a nap at work. The big problem is his office has a glass wall on it. You can see into the hallway. He would get caught very easily. He even tries taking a nap while hiding his head behind this big, thick green book. Until Wilhelm came in saying that he needed it. So he's having no luck there. But then he realizes, he gets this idea, why don't I start napping under the desk? And it works. He feels refreshed. And of course, that's his new little hangout at work. He wants to give a few upgrades, though, to it. We'll find out how he does that. Actually, we'll get into that now. Jerry, meanwhile, is having his cabinets in his kitchen redone. However, the process is taking very slow because his contractor he hired, Conrad, is very slow. And he asks tons of questions about the littlest things that just aren't even necessary. And it just drives Jerry insane. He's losing his patience with him. So, like, questions simple as, which hinge do you want on your cabinets? And Jerry doesn't care. He goes, well, they're both different. Like, whatever you want. It's just like, okay, it's like, like, you don't have to ask questions about every little thing. And then, of course, Jerry thinks that it's never going to get done. And he gets sick of sitting there waiting for him to get stuff done as he keeps just asking questions, and he's getting absolutely nowhere with it. Of course, George comes in and mentions the thing about the desk, and he gets his idea to ask Conrad to, maybe do a couple little modifications under it. Expand it a little bit for him to be able to sleep there. He wants to add, like a drawer or like a shelf on there to put like a clock, or even just like tiny little things. It's like his own little tiny little fort underneath that desk. To which Jerry, of course, tells Conrad, go ahead and work with George to give him a break. Of course, George ends up being up all night with Conrad at Yankee Stadium because Conrad's doing the same exact thing. Asking him questions like, oh, that big? This big? This wide? This wide? Like, it's just like, he has to have his hand held every step of the way. And it's driving everybody nuts. But, of course, George has great results from that. He's able to hide out there. He's able to hide a little clock in there. He has a little mug in there. It was a neat little setup. This idea actually did come from one of the writers who had a coworker one time who used to like to nap underneath his desk, and because of the same reasons why George had, his office was no way to block him off from seeing him napping, and he would get caught very easily. So of course George is having a good old time with that. We'll come back to that. And we'll come back to Jerry's story. So let's go on to Elaine's and Kramer's story. So Kramer's story is that he's taken up swimming. He apparently did 200 laps at the health club he's at now. Well, then, of course, he was in a groove, so he thought he'd go on longer. And this one's kind of Kramer's fault. So he's trying to swim during these scheduled classes. And the pool's getting too crowded, so he needs to find a new place to swim. And where does he go to swim? The East River. He's swimming from, like, the Manhattan Bridge to the Brooklyn Bridge, I think it is. And, of course, though, it's polluted. It stinks. There's a bunch of dead bodies in there. Kramer doesn't catch on to it right away, but then later he catches on saying that it stinks, and it's like, well, hello, we told you that before him. Elaine, meanwhile, she's dating this guy named Hal Kitzmiller, which for some reason it feels like, no one else can get his last name right. Like, Hal Langhorn Kitzmiller. I had the snap, Kitzmiller. Him and Elaine go on a walk. And she finds out that Hal apparently has back problems. And then later, after this is their first date, Elaine receives a mattress that was sent to her from Hal. Elaine first takes this as an insult, thinking that she has to get a new mattress because of him. And she was so pissed about it that she got rid of the mattress and gave it to Kramer. Well, then she finds out from Hal that Hal got a custom fit for her to make sure, it's comfortable for her to sleep on. So then Elaine thought, okay, he's not such a jerk after all. So she gets a mattress back from Kramer. Problem, though, is Kramer was sleeping in that after he started swimming in the East River. So that mattress smells it stinks. Of course, Hal then catches on to it, because he then stops by later and smells the mattress, and then Elaine covers up by saying she went clamming and scalping. Until then, they run into Kramer while they're walking, and then Hal smells Kramer and realizes that it's the same smell. So he thinks something's going on with Kramer and Elaine. And of course he confronts Kramer, but basically Kramer unknowingly says, yeah, I've been in her bed, but nothing's going on anymore. So it was an awkward thing, but it worked. But then Kramer happened to mention to Hal that swimming in the East River has helped him with his back. With his back. And of course, Hal, being a guy who is, very cautious about his back because he has back problems, decides to tell his chiropractor, and now everyone wants to swim in the East River. Of course, Kramer doesn't like that because now he doesn't have his own space, even though I'm like, Kramer, the East River is super wide. You can just move over a little bit and swim there. I don't get why Kramer... Okay, a pool I can get, even though, once again, it was Kramer's fault because Kramer was swimming during times where it was scheduled classes and whatnot. Kramer was being a little... Well, then again, it is Kramer to begin with. He doesn't realize things right away. It's like, again, like the smell of, the East River. Later on, he says he realizes it. Or how back in the comeback episode, he didn't realize that he could wake up from a coma, even though, again, he had talked to two people who had woken up from a coma before, but, So that's basically those two stories. Now, Jerry and George's stories kind of tie into each other as well. Because, first off, Jerry, again, was getting sick of Conrad. Finally, he had to go leave. And he just tells Conrad, just do whatever you want and finish this today. Well, he gets back, and not only did Conrad put in these cabinets, but he also, moved the refrigerator over to the other side, across in there. And he, basically, instead of having, the counter, he turned that into, a little drive-in service with chairs and whatnot by there. I mean, there was there before, but they basically, just spread out the cabinets more. But it was not what Jerry had in mind at all. So at first he was fine with it, of course, until all of his friends started complaining about it. Then he told Conrad to change it back, to which Conrad calls him indecisive. Even though Conrad's the one who has always been indecisive, and this drove Jerry nuts. He was selling with whatever until, all of his friends hated it. George, meanwhile, again, is enjoying his new life sleeping under the desk. Until one day when Steinbrenner came by looking for him. And it was all because he had some song stuck in his head. I believe the song was called... Heartbreaker by Pat Benatar, which was released in 1979. And, but then he basically said, I'm just going to wait and sit here until, he shows up. And 3.5 hours go by and George is still underneath the desk, as if he shows himself, he'll get caught. Well, then Steinbrenner's grandchildren came, and they were just, playing in the office. Even the dog came and started licking George, and one of the grandsons found George, like, "Hi, I'm Brian." He's like, "Beat it, Brian." Well, then George had kept his phone down underneath the desk with him. That way he can make a call in case of an emergency. So he calls Jerry, and he's trying to find some way to get out of this. And what does he do? He tells Jerry to call a bomb threat on Yankee Stadium, which is a little too far, especially if you're trying to get out of something. You could have, distracted him some other way. Well, I guess George, desperate, had to think a little bit more major, because if it was something not so important, Steinbrenner probably waved it off, because George was just finding some way to get around it. Apparently, also, it's hard to get fired from the Yankees. George found that out, I think it's the Millennium, I believe. Yeah, the Millennium, which we'll get to that, of course, in 2 episodes. So, Jerry calls it in. Steinbrenner freaks out and tells everybody to hide under the desk. And, of course, that's when it cuts to commercial break. And, of course, they had found George hidden underneath the desk, who at first was excited that, the call was brought through. But then it all backfires whenever George is caught underneath the desk. And Steinbrenner then thinks that George has ESP, and he thinks that George knew that bomb was coming. So, of course, apparently Jerry, posing as, the bomber, said that the reason why he was doing this was because he wanted Fitted Hat Day at Yankee Stadium. But who does Steinbrenner put in charge of that? George. And George was, flipping out about it, and he was not happy about it. So he told Jerry to call him back and basically say, call it off, that's not what you want. Jerry does. Unfortunately, though, Steinbrenner was like, well, you hate us that much, what is that you really want? He doesn't buy that, he's just calling it off and just letting us go, that's it. So then Jerry says, well, I guess it would be nice to have, the fans who bought tickets to be called to let them know that, the games are rained out. Of course, Steinbrenner's going to put George in charge of that. But then George hangs up on him, and then George's like, we got to stand our ground. But then, of course, Steinbrenner's not falling for it, and he's getting up and running all over the stadium, shutting the windows so that way nobody can get in. And then later in the episode, Steinbrenner goes to find George again. He was not in his office at the time. But he hears a little ticking, which was the clock in the drawer in one of the cabinets under the desk that Conrad had made. Of course, then Steinbrenner pulls everyone into his office, and the bomb squad has a robot go search George's office to make sure there's nothing there. Of course, George does get caught with a couple glamour magazines or whatnot. And of course they hear the ticking, so instead they saw up George's desk. So there goes George's desk. I think that was the actual last appearance of that room anyways, because George does get promoted in the Millennium. And we see a shot of his new office in the Muffin Tops, but unfortunately that was the last of the Yankees job storyline for George, which of course we'll talk about why he lost his job in the Muffin Tops. And yeah, George's little space was ruined. Of course, then in the ending credits, though, George stops by Jerry's apartment. Jerry wasn't there, and Conrad was there, and of course he was annoyed because he had to to take everything down, even though once again Jerry was just sick of him also to begin with. So of course and of course they talk about how the desk was just a pleasant little space, and then he just says, "I'll see you," and he heads out. Jerry later comes back and he opens up his cabinet and puts something in there that he had got for when he went shopping. And George is sleeping in his new cabinets. Of course, we just see George from head up sleeping in the pillow. And I'm like, how the heck did he even get up there? And like, how was he able to extend that far across? Especially if George's like a short, stocky man. Obviously, his weight would not be strong enough to hold him up in those cabinets. But it was just hilarious. But then Jerry stops, thinking that Jerry saw George. Instead, opens the cabinets again, grabs what he just bought and shuts it. And he goes, "Can't believe I got the low fat." So it's just like he noticed his error on his shopping, but he didn't notice George in the cabinets. But that's how the episode ends. Very creative episode. Again, this whole idea of George napping under the desk was definitely a pure George storyline. Again, Kramer swimming in the East River was nuts, and Elaine, of course, having that funky mattress. Oh, I forgot to mention this story. This part, I forgot to mention it. So because Kramer had ruined the mattress with that smell, Elaine was still getting rid of the mattress, but the people who dropped off the mattress were gonna come back into her apartment to pick it up. So she had to drag it out of her apartment, but she threw her back out and fell underneath the mattress, which of course was why Jerry had to leave and told Conrad to do whatever he wanted to, whatever the heck it was. But that's what led to Elaine also swimming in the East River, the boogie board at the end of the episode, because she threw her back out trying to lift the mattress. Forgot to mention that. A couple trivia facts, though. Like I said, this was Larry David's first episode he done the voice of Steinbrenner, and his first appearance, of course, since he had left the series as executive producer. As you saw, also, the Seinfeld logo, again, usually shown at the beginning of an episode, was shown with like a checkered flag. It was shown several more times because originally Jerry thought that this was going to be the final season. Of course, it was not. They had, one more season, but it was meant to resemble, the checkered flag being at an auto race signifies the final lap. Of course, it wasn't the final episode, the final season, as of course, again, they would come back for season 9. But at first, he was thinking this may be it. And of course, the East River scenes were filmed at Universal Studios in a circular tank, kind of similar to how back in the Friars Club episode in season 7, where Kramer had to swim away when he got dumped into the East River when his mafia girlfriend thought he was dead. But again, he had fallen asleep because he had been trying out those Leonardo da Vinci sleep habits. But the same thing, it was still inside the tank, but they had to digitally edit in water around it. Some people say they do notice that you can notice where, it's a digital water and the real water, but I never really took notice of it at all. And then, of course, when Hal was saying that he had got the mattress custom fit for Elaine, he described her as 5'8", 110 pounds. I don't know what Julia Louis-Dreyfus' real weight was, but apparently she's only 5'3", so that's way off there. Let me see here. This was also the first episode in George's office at the Yankee Stadium, where you can see the opposite side when Steinbrenner came back in the second time in the episode looking for George, instead of the glass wall you could see. So it was definitely different. And also the kitchen island shelves that, of course, were built after the new design at first, which Kramer walked in and said, "Oh, I'm on the wrong floor again." And everybody, of course, like Jerry would come around to one side, everybody would go around the other side. It was funny. But those wobbled for some reason every time, someone banged on it. Like George, when he was flipping out on Jerry about how he got stuck doing the fitted hat day thing that Jerry called in about when he called in to do the bomb threat that George had advised him to do. So yeah, that's a little odd because this should have been bolted down. But yeah, that's the nap episode. Next up is a classic, the Yada Yada. Maybe the best episode in season 8, but definitely I would say one of the better episodes, one of the best concepts for sure. Although Peter Melman didn't think that was the phrase that was going to catch on though in that episode. What was the phrase he thought was going to catch on? You're going to find out next in the Yada Yada. So guys, what were your thoughts on the nap episode? Again, personally, I liked it. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. And follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirboy93. And until then, guys, I am checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out, everybody.